She was always different. From the moment she could remember, she saw the world in her own way. While other children ran and shouted in the streets, she often wandered alone, watching the small things that others never noticed. The way sunlight slipped through the leaves, the soft sound of wind over rooftops, the rhythm of rain on a tin roof. These were the things that caught her attention. But the one thing she loved most was the piano. The piano had been in her life for as long as she could remember. It was old and a little out of tune, with keys that sometimes stuck if you pressed them too hard. It wasn't much to look at, and sometimes she wondered if it had been forgotten in the corner of the living room because it wasn't perfect. But to her it was beautiful. She didn't need anyone else to understand it. When her fingers touched the keys, it was as if the whole world disappeared. The laughter, the teasing, the worries, they all melted away, leaving only the music. School was a different story. She didn't fit in the way other kids did. Her clothes were simple, her hair often messy, and she spoke softly, always thinking carefully before she said anything. The other children didn't understand her. They whispered behind her back, calling her names, laughing at the way she held herself, at the way she spent so much time with her piano instead of running and shouting with them. They didn't see her for who she really was. They didn't see the quiet strength inside her. They didn't hear the music that lived in her heart. To them, she was just the quiet girl who plays the piano all the time. It hurt sometimes, the way they laughed, the way they pointed, the way they treated her like she didn't belong. She wanted to shout to tell them to stop, but the words never came. She had learned long ago that words could be cruel, but music could not. Music always told the truth. At home, it was different. Her family didn't have much, but they tried to be kind and supportive. Her grandmother had been the one who gave her the piano, saying, "This is your gift. Treat it well." Her grandmother's words stayed with her. Even when other people laughed, even when the world felt heavy and unkind, she had her piano. It was her friend, her teacher, her safe place. Every day after school, she would sit down and play. Sometimes it was simple melodies she had learned from books. Other times, she made up her own music, letting her fingers move without thinking, letting the sound carry her thoughts and feelings. She wrote songs about everything she felt, about sadness, about hope, about dreams, about the laughter of the children who didn't understand her. She didn't play to impress anyone. She played because she had to. Music was not just a hobby. It was part of her, like breathing or blinking, something that could not be stopped. The more she played, the better she became. Her fingers learned to move gracefully, to hit the right notes with the perfect touch to bring out the emotion hidden in every piece. Sometimes she would sit for hours, completely absorbed, forgetting about time, forgetting about food, forgetting about everything except the music. When she played, the piano spoke for her. It told her secrets, it held her worries, it celebrated her joys. At school, the laughter continued. Children would stare when she carried her music books in the hallways, whispering to each other, "Why does she spend so much time with that old piano? Doesn't she want to play like us?" They didn't see that playing on the piano was not just about having fun. It was about expressing herself, about making sense of her world, about surviving each day in a place where she sometimes felt invisible. Sometimes, she tried to join in with the others. She would laugh, she would answer questions, she would try to be like them, but it never felt right. The words they used, the games they played, the way they lived their lives, it all felt foreign to her. She didn't belong in that world, but she didn't mind too much. She had her piano and it was enough. There were teachers who noticed her talent. Some smiled when she played, telling her she had a gift. Others shook their heads thinking she was wasting her time, that she should focus on more normal activities, more practical skills. But she ignored them. She didn't need approval from anyone except herself and her piano. Her music was her voice, and it spoke louder than anything else. When she was frustrated, she poured it into the keys, letting each note carry her anger and disappointment. When she was happy, she let the sound dance across the room, filling every corner with joy. When she was lonely, she played softly, letting the piano whisper back to her, comforting her, reminding her that she was not truly alone. Her classmates still laughed. Sometimes it was cruel, sometimes it was curious, but it never stopped. She learned to walk past them, to ignore their words, to focus on the one thing that mattered: the music. It wasn't easy. Some days the teasing hurt so much that she wanted to run away, to hide, to never play again. But the piano waited for her. It never judged, never laughed, never left. She began to notice something magical about playing. When her fingers moved across the keys, it was as if the piano understood her in ways that people could not. The instrument seemed to respond to her emotions, to mirror her feelings in sound. When she was sad, the music was soft, almost fragile. When she was angry, it roared and thundered. When she was joyful, it sparkled like sunlight on water. It was not just a tool. It was alive in a way, alive with her. In the evenings, when the house was quiet and the stars came out, she would sit for hours, letting her mind drift with the music. She imagined herself in distant places, far from the laughter and teasing, far from the doubts and fears. She imagined large concert halls filled with people who listened, who understood, who felt what she felt. She imagined herself standing in front of a crowd, not hiding, not afraid, letting the music flow from her heart to theirs. But for now, she played in silence, mostly alone. Sometimes her younger sibling would peek in, watching her fingers move, fascinated by the sounds that filled the room. Sometimes her parents would stop and listen, smiling at the beauty they could hear even if they didn't fully understand it. It was a small world, but it was hers, and it was perfect in its own way. She had dreams, big dreams, dreams that felt impossible at times. She wanted to play in front of people, to show the world the music she carried inside. She wanted to prove that the laughter and the teasing did not matter, that what she could create with her hands was more powerful than anything anyone could say about her. But the fear of being laughed at, of failing, of being misunderstood was always there, lurking at the edges. Still, she practiced. Every day she practiced. Every day she let the piano speak for her. Every day she reminded herself that the world might not understand her yet, but that did not make her any less real, any less talented, any less valuable. She learned to find strength in her solitude, courage in her quiet, and joy in her music. Even as the other children laughed, even as the teachers dismissed her, even as the world seemed too harsh and unkind, she continued. Because she knew something they didn't. The piano knew her truth. The music she created, the feeling she expressed, the soul she poured into every note, it was real. It was honest. And one day she believed the world would listen. Until that day came, she had her piano, her music, and herself. And for her, that was enough to keep going. Enough to survive the teasing, enough to dream beyond the walls of her small world. She was quiet, she was misunderstood, but she was strong. She was patient. And she was determined. Every note she played was a promise to herself, a promise that she would not give up, a promise that her voice would be heard, a promise that her music would tell the story that words could never fully capture. The piano was not just wood and keys. It was a part of her soul. And she knew deep inside that one day it would show the world the truth they had all ignored. For now, she played, and in the sound of her music, the world could feel a glimpse of her heart. As the days passed, her connection with the piano grew stronger. It was no longer just a friend or a safe place. It had become a part of her, an extension of her thoughts and feelings. She could sit at the keys and tell the piano exactly what she was thinking, what she was feeling without saying a single word. It was a freedom she could not find anywhere else. When her classmates laughed or ignored her, the piano listened, never judging, never turning away. It simply responded with sound, and in that sound she found comfort and courage. At school, life continued much the same. The laughter didn't stop. Children still whispered behind her back, some pointing, some rolling their eyes. The teachers didn't always understand her either. A few praised her talent quietly, but most simply suggested that she should focus on normal things or do other activities. She knew they meant well, but it never felt like they really understood her. Their words were kind but empty. The only approval that mattered to her was the one that came from the piano itself, the music that resonated in the quiet corners of her room. Her afternoons became a ritual. As soon as she got home, she would leave her school bag by the door, slip off her shoes, and sit at the piano. Her fingers would hover over the keys for a moment, almost like a greeting before moving with ease and purpose. Sometimes she played pieces from books, old classical music that had been passed down for generations. Sometimes she improvised, creating new melodies that nobody had ever heard before. These were her private songs, songs that told the story of her heart in ways words could not. It was during these hours that she began to notice something about herself. She was learning not just about music, but about life. She was learning patience, learning that practice and dedication were more important than applause or approval. She was learning that being different was not a weakness but a strength. Every note she played, every chord she discovered, every melody she invented became proof that she had something the others could not take away from her. Her own voice. One afternoon, as she played a piece she had been working on for weeks, her younger sibling came into the room and watched her quietly. They had always admired her talent, though they rarely said it out loud. Today, however, something changed. As she finished the final note of a complex section, her sibling clapped softly and said, "You're really good. I didn't know you could play like that." For a moment she looked up, surprised, unsure if she should feel proud or embarrassed. She nodded slightly, a shy smile forming on her lips. It was a small moment, but it mattered. For the first time, someone had noticed the depth of her skill without any teasing, without any judgment. It reminded her that even if the world around her laughed, there were still people who could see and appreciate her truth. It gave her a spark of hope, a quiet confidence that maybe one day more people would hear what she had to say through her music. Her talent did not go unnoticed forever. One of her music teachers, who had been quietly observing her over the months, finally approached her after class. "You have something special," the teacher said softly, almost as if speaking too loudly would scare it away. "I can see it in the way you play, in the way you feel the music. Have you ever thought about performing somewhere?" She shook her head, unsure if she was ready. The idea of performing in front of people made her heart race with fear. She imagined the laughter, the whispers, the judgment, and for a moment she wanted to say no. But the teacher smiled gently and said, "Not everyone will understand at first, but the ones who do will remember you. They will feel what you feel, and that is a gift." That night she sat at the piano thinking about the conversation. Her fingers moved over the keys automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. Could she really perform in front of people? Could she let them hear the music that came straight from her soul? The fear was strong, but so was something else, an urge she had felt for a long time deep inside, telling her that her music was meant for more than just empty rooms and quiet evenings. Days turned into weeks, and she began to prepare herself. Not just in terms of playing perfectly, but in terms of finding courage. She practiced the same pieces over and over, learning to control her nerves, learning to trust herself. She realized that the music was not about being perfect. It was about being honest. It was about letting people see a piece of her heart through every note. And if they laughed or whispered, that was their choice, not hers. Her dedication began to show results. She started to notice that her fingers moved more confidently across the keys, that she could play longer and more complex pieces without tiring. She began to experiment with different styles, blending classical melodies with her own improvisations. Every new composition felt like a small triumph, a way of proving to herself that her voice mattered, even if the world had not yet listened. The world outside the piano was still difficult. There were days when classmates laughed louder, when teachers seemed distracted or indifferent, when even her family had worries that distracted them from noticing her progress. Yet in those moments she learned a secret that would carry her through the toughest times. The piano never judged, never tired, never turned away. It always responded to her efforts with sound, with emotion, with life. She also discovered that music could connect people in ways nothing else could. Sometimes she would play quietly in the living room while her family ate dinner, and they would stop, even if just for a moment, to listen. Sometimes her music made them smile, sometimes it made them thoughtful, and sometimes it made them remember something they had long forgotten. In those moments, she realized that music had a power far beyond what she had imagined. It could touch hearts, it could speak without words, it could reveal truths that no one else could see. Her confidence grew, little by little. It was not sudden or dramatic, but quiet, steady, like a candle burning through a dark room. She began to feel that maybe, just maybe, she could take a step further. She could try to share her music with the world, even if only a few people heard it at first. The idea was terrifying but thrilling at the same time. For the first time, she felt that her music had a purpose beyond her own heart. One evening, she decided to try something new. She played a piece she had composed entirely on her own, something she had never shown anyone before. Her fingers moved with a mix of fear and excitement, unsure if the melody would sound the way she imagined. But as the notes filled the room, something remarkable happened. The music seemed to come alive. It carried the feelings she had hidden for so long. Loneliness, hope, fear, joy, and determination, all in one flowing story. Her family listened silently, captivated. Even her younger sibling, who usually fidgeted or wandered off, stayed close to the piano, watching every movement of her fingers. When the final note lingered in the air, the room was quiet for a moment, and then her family applauded softly. Not loudly, not exaggeratedly, just a gentle acknowledgement of something beautiful that had been shared. It was enough to make her heart swell with pride and gratitude. From that day, she began to understand that her music had the power to move people. She realized that she didn't need everyone to understand or approve. She only needed those willing to listen with their hearts. The piano, which had always been her confidant, became her voice to the world. Each day she practiced not just for herself, but for the possibility that one day, her music could reach others in the same way it had reached her family that night. Even though the teasing at school continued, it began to feel less important. She had discovered something stronger than laughter, something louder than whispers, something that could not be diminished by judgment or cruelty. It was a truth she had always known in her heart, but now she could feel it more fully. Her music was real, and it mattered. She continued to play day after day, letting her skills grow, letting her confidence grow, letting her heart pour into every note. She began to dream not just of performing, but of touching lives, of showing people that even someone quiet and misunderstood could create something beautiful and powerful. The piano had taught her that the world might not always understand her, but that did not mean she had no place in it. Slowly, she started imagining a future she had never dared to before. She imagined herself performing for people who would listen carefully, who would feel the emotions in her music as if they were their own. She imagined her compositions being remembered, not for her fame, but for the way they could make someone feel seen, heard, and understood. She imagined herself standing confidently, no longer hiding from the world because her music had given her strength to be herself. Her life was still filled with challenges. There were days when she felt small, when the laughter and judgment were too heavy, when the fear of failure threatened to silence her. But each time she sat at the piano, she remembered the power she held in her own hands. She remembered the quiet moments when her music spoke louder than words. She remembered that even if no one else understood, she did, and that was enough to keep her going. And so, she continued day after day, note after note, melody after melody, building not just skill, but courage, resilience, and hope. She began to see that her journey was not just about playing the piano, but about discovering who she was, what she could endure, and what she could create. The piano was her guide, her teacher, her friend, and her mirror, reflecting back the truth that had always been inside her. She no longer wondered if she was weird or different in a negative way. She knew that her uniqueness was her gift, and her music was the proof of it. Every time she played, she told a story of perseverance, of inner strength, and of a heart that refused to be silenced. She had learned that even in a world that laughed at her, there was a place where she belonged, a place where her truth could be heard, felt, and celebrated. And in that place, surrounded by the familiar black and white keys, she discovered something even more precious than skill or talent. She discovered herself. The announcement of the music competition came on a bright Monday morning. The school bulletin had a colorful poster pinned to the wall, and students crowded around to read it. Some were excited, talking loudly about showing off their talents. Some didn't care at all. She glanced at the poster quietly, feeling a mixture of curiosity and fear. A competition meant performing in front of others, something she had dreamed about quietly for years but never dared to imagine doing in reality. Her heart beat fast as she read the details. Participants were asked to perform a piece of their choice, either classical or original, and there would be a small audience of students, teachers, and parents. The first thought that crossed her mind was fear. The laughter, the whispers, the teasing. It all came rushing back as if the memory of every unkind word had been saved for this moment. She imagined walking onto the stage, standing in front of everyone, and hearing them laugh at her. Her fingers trembled just thinking about it. But then she remembered something else. She remembered the countless afternoons she had spent with her piano, practicing for hours, creating melodies that no one had ever heard. She remembered the way her music could carry her feelings, the way it could make her feel strong and brave even on the hardest days. She remembered the quiet applause of her family, the look of wonder on her sibling's face when she had played something new. That memory gave her a small spark of courage. She decided to try. The decision was quiet, almost hidden like a seed planted in the soil. She didn't tell anyone immediately. She wanted to prepare first to make sure that when she did step onto that stage, she could do it on her own terms. For the next few weeks, she practiced relentlessly. Each day after school, she would go straight to her piano, her fingers moving over the keys with more determination than ever before. She worked on old pieces, new compositions, and the one piece she had composed entirely on her own. Every note had to be perfect, or at least as close to perfect as she could make it. The more she practiced, the more her confidence grew. She began to notice how the music responded to her emotions, how it reflected not just skill but feeling. She experimented with dynamics, with tempo, with pauses, trying to make the piano speak exactly what she felt. Sometimes late at night she would play softly, listening to the echoes in the empty room, imagining a crowd before her, imagining their eyes on her hands. The image terrified her, but it also excited her. She realized that performing was not just about being seen. It was about sharing her story, letting the music speak when words could not. Her friends at school noticed something changing. She walked with a little more confidence, held her head a little higher, and even smiled more often. Some of them were still teasing, but their words started to feel less sharp, as if her growing strength made them less effective. She learned to ignore them, to let the music be her shield. She carried her music everywhere in her mind, even when she was away from the piano. She hummed melodies in the hallway, tapped rhythms on her desk, and imagined the notes filling the air wherever she went. The day of the competition arrived. She woke up early, her stomach twisting with nerves. She dressed in simple clothes, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. She didn't want to be noticed for her appearance. She wanted to be noticed for her music. She carried her sheet music carefully, walked into the school auditorium, and found a quiet corner to sit and wait. The room was buzzing with excitement, filled with students chatting, teachers arranging chairs, and parents looking around expectantly. She felt small, almost invisible in the middle of all the activity. When it was her turn, the fear returned stronger than ever. She walked to the stage slowly, each step heavy with doubt. She could hear whispers and snickers from the audience, some questioning why she was even there. Her hands trembled as she opened her sheet music, and she took a deep breath. For a moment she considered walking away, going back to the safety of her room, to the piano that had never judged her. But then she remembered the hours of practice, the melodies she had created, the truth she wanted to share. She could not turn back now. As her fingers touched the keys, something remarkable happened. The fear began to fade, replaced by a focus so intense it felt like the world had disappeared. The first note resonated through the auditorium, soft and clear, catching the attention of everyone in the room. The whispers stopped. The laughter vanished. All that remained was the music, flowing from her heart through her fingers and into the air. Each note carried a story. The audience could feel her nervousness, her hope, her determination, and even her past loneliness. The music spoke in ways words could not, telling a story of someone who had been laughed at, dismissed, and underestimated, yet had never given up. Her fingers moved quickly at times, gently at others, creating a rhythm that was both delicate and powerful. She felt herself becoming one with the piano, as if they were speaking together, telling the audience everything she could not say aloud. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her. She didn't think about the audience or their opinions. She didn't worry about mistakes or missteps. She simply played. Every note was her voice, every chord her declaration that she belonged, every melody a proof that her truth was real. The piano, which had always known her, carried her story perfectly, translating her emotions into sound that could be felt by anyone willing to listen. As she reached the final section of her piece, the music swelled, filling the auditorium with a richness and depth that made hearts pause. She played with everything she had, pouring her soul into the keys. And when the final note lingered in the air, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then slowly applause began, first hesitant, then stronger, until it grew into a wave of appreciation. Some of her classmates looked surprised, some teachers nodded with quiet pride, and even parents whispered to each other about the beauty of what they had just heard. She opened her eyes and saw the faces around her. For the first time, she noticed more than just judgment or laughter. She saw curiosity, respect, and wonder. She realized that her music had reached people, had touched them in ways nothing else could. She felt a sense of pride she had never known, a feeling that her efforts, her dedication, and her patience had finally been recognized. After the performance, her teacher approached her with a smile. "You were amazing," they said simply, but it carried weight. "You played from your heart and everyone could feel it. That is something rare and beautiful." She nodded, a shy smile forming on her lips. She didn't need more praise. The applause, the recognition, the feeling that she had shared her truth, this was enough. Her classmates, even those who had laughed before, came over cautiously, some offering quiet congratulations. She noticed that some of them seemed to see her differently now, not as the quiet, strange girl, but as someone with talent, passion, and courage. It was not an instant change, but it was a start. She realized that sometimes people only needed to see a glimpse of your truth to understand, and her music had given them that glimpse. In the days that followed, the memory of the performance stayed with her. She thought about the fear she had felt, the trembling hands, the racing heart. She thought about the silence that had followed the last note, and the applause that had come after. She realized that fear was natural, that doubt was natural, but that courage was not the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it. She had taken that step, and it had changed something inside her forever. She continued to practice, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. She began to dream bigger, to imagine herself performing for larger audiences, sharing her compositions with people who had never met her. She thought about writing new music that told stories of hope, of struggle, of triumph over laughter and doubt. She realized that her piano was not just a personal refuge anymore. It was a tool to connect with the world, to let others feel the emotions she had carried for so long. Her life at school also began to shift. Some classmates who had ignored her before started to approach her with questions about her music, wanting to know how she learned, what inspired her compositions. Not everyone changed, but she no longer worried about that. She had learned that approval from everyone was unnecessary. She only needed to be true to herself, and her music would speak the rest. Even her family noticed the change. They saw her confidence growing, the way she carried herself, the way she spoke about music with excitement and passion. They were proud, not just of her performance, but of the courage and dedication that had brought her to this point. They knew that her journey had only just begun, that the path ahead would have more challenges, but they also knew that she had found her strength, her voice, and her purpose. At night, after everyone had gone to bed, she would sit at the piano alone, replaying the memory of the performance in her mind. She would experiment with new melodies, write down compositions, and practice until her fingers ached. She knew that every note was a step forward, every practice session a preparation for the next opportunity to share her truth. The piano, as always, responded to her with warmth and understanding, as if it too had celebrated her triumph and was ready to carry her further. She had learned a powerful lesson, that fear was temporary, but the truth of who she was, expressed through her music, was permanent. And as she continued to play day after day, she began to realize that her story was no longer just about being laughed at or dismissed. It was about courage, perseverance, and the power of music to show the world a truth that words alone could never convey. After the competition, life began to change slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. She still walked through the hallways of her school quietly, still faced moments of teasing and judgment, but the laughter no longer held the power it once had. Something inside her had shifted. The memory of the applause, the way her music had reached people's hearts, had planted a seed of confidence that was growing every day. She realized that recognition was not about everyone seeing her, but about being true to herself and trusting the voice within her that had always believed in her music. Her music teacher became more involved in her growth, offering guidance, advice, and encouragement. They noticed the depth of emotion in her compositions and the way she could make a piano sing in ways that were rare for someone her age. They encouraged her to explore different styles of music, to try her hand at composing, and even to experiment with rhythm and improvisation. Every suggestion was met with eagerness as she began to see the piano, not just as an instrument, but as a partner in her creative journey. Word of her talent slowly spread beyond her small classroom. A few parents who had attended the competition asked if she would play at a small local event, a charity gathering in the community hall. At first, the thought terrified her. Performing in front of strangers, people she didn't know. How could she do it? But then she remembered the feeling from the competition, the way fear had turned into focus, the way the music had carried her beyond doubt, and the way the audience had listened, really listened. She agreed cautiously, feeling both fear and excitement stirring in her chest. The day of her first public performance outside school arrived, and she felt a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. She dressed simply as always and carried her sheet music carefully. When she arrived at the community hall, the sight of the audience waiting quietly made her heart race. She took a deep breath, remembering the countless afternoons spent practicing alone in her room. Those hours had prepared her more than any words of encouragement could. She realized that the music she carried inside her was stronger than any fear or judgment. When her fingers touched the keys, the hall seemed to change. The chatter faded, replaced by the soft resonance of the piano. She played with every ounce of feeling she had, letting the music flow naturally as if telling a story she had longed to share. Each note carried a piece of her heart, each chord a reflection of the struggles she had faced, the solitude she had endured, and the quiet victories she had celebrated in private. The audience listened, captivated, and she realized that this was why she had been practicing all those years, not for fame, not for approval, but to touch the hearts of others in a way that only music could. After the performance, people approached her with smiles and kind words. They asked how she had learned to play with such emotion, praised her compositions, and even encouraged her to continue sharing her music. She felt a warmth she had never known, a feeling that her efforts had meaning beyond herself. It was not the recognition itself that mattered most, but the understanding that she could connect with others in a way that transcended words. She realized that music was not just a personal escape anymore, it was a bridge to the world. With each performance, her confidence grew. She began to accept invitations to play at school events, local festivals, and small gatherings. Every time she carried the same mixture of fear and excitement, but each time she proved to herself that she could rise above doubt. Her music began to shape her life in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer just the quiet girl at the back of the classroom. She was a musician, a storyteller, someone who could express truth without speaking a single word. Her classmates began to see her differently. Some who had once mocked her now asked questions about her practice, showed genuine interest in her music, and even listened when she played. The laughter that had once echoed around her seemed distant, almost irrelevant. She learned that people's opinions only mattered if she allowed them to. The piano, which had always been her companion, had taught her that her voice was valuable, and that those willing to listen would recognize it. She also discovered the joy of teaching. A few younger students, curious about her music, asked if she could show them how to play. At first she was hesitant, unsure if she could explain what came so naturally to her, but as she began to guide them, showing them how to place their fingers on the keys, how to feel the rhythm, and how to let the music express their emotions, she felt a new kind of satisfaction. It was not about being praised. It was about helping others find their own voice. She realized that sharing knowledge could be as fulfilling as creating music itself. Her family continued to support her quietly, proud of her accomplishments but careful not to pressure her. They understood that her journey was hers alone, and that her music was more than a hobby, it was her identity. They encouraged her to practice, to explore, and to dream, offering advice only when she asked. Their quiet presence provided her with stability and reassurance, a foundation she could always return to after each performance, no matter how nerve-wracking or exhausting it was. As she grew, she began to explore more complex compositions, experimenting with tempo, rhythm, and dynamics. She started blending different musical styles, creating pieces that were uniquely hers. Some were soft and reflective, capturing quiet moments of introspection. Others were bold and powerful, expressing emotions too strong for words. She realized that the piano was not just an instrument, it was a partner, responding to her ideas and helping her discover the full range of her creativity. Her performances began to draw attention from beyond her immediate circle. Local musicians and teachers came to hear her play, impressed by the emotion and skill she displayed. They offered guidance, introducing her to new techniques, new pieces, and new ways to express herself. Every encounter was a learning experience, every suggestion an opportunity to grow. She realized that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, Practice and the willingness to learn were just as important. Despite her growing recognition, she remained humble and focused. She never forgot the hours spent alone at her piano, the moments when the world laughed at her, and the quiet strength she had found in those experiences. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that there would always be challenges, and that the laughter or judgment of others would never disappear completely. But she had learned to rise above it, to let the music guide her, and to trust in the truth she carried inside. With every performance, she became more comfortable with herself. She learned to embrace her individuality, to understand that being different was not a weakness but a gift. She began to dress and carry herself in a way that reflected her identity, not the expectations of others. She discovered that confidence came not from the approval of the crowd, but from the knowledge that she was true to herself and that her music could speak when words could not. The piano remained at the center of her life, a constant companion through every challenge and triumph. She practiced tirelessly, explored new compositions, and experimented with improvisation. She began to imagine larger audiences, bigger stages, and the possibility of sharing her music beyond her small community. Each new idea brought excitement but also fear. Yet she had learned that fear was part of growth, part of the process, and that moving forward despite it was the key to discovering what she was truly capable of. She also began to reflect on the impact her music had on others. She noticed how people would pause to listen, how their expressions changed when they felt the emotion in her playing, and how even a few notes could brighten someone's day or comfort a troubled heart. She realized that her gift was not just about personal fulfillment, it was about connection, about reaching people in ways that words alone could not. The thought filled her with purpose, giving her a reason to continue even when she felt exhausted or discouraged. As she continued to grow, she understood that her story was no longer just about overcoming ridicule or proving herself to others. It was about discovering the power of her own voice, the strength of her dedication, and the beauty of expressing truth through music. Every note, every chord, every melody was a testament to her journey, a record of the challenges she had faced and the victories she had achieved. She began to set goals for herself, small and large. She wanted to compose pieces that would move people, to perform in larger venues, and to continue learning from teachers and mentors. She wanted to inspire others, especially those who felt misunderstood or overlooked, to find their own voice and express it without fear. The idea of helping others gave her music even more meaning, turning her talent into a tool for connection and encouragement. Even as recognition grew, she remained grounded. She never sought attention for its own sake, never let praise or admiration define her. Instead, she focused on the music itself, on the emotion, the technique, and the connection it created. She understood that true fulfillment came not from applause, but from the knowledge that her music had touched hearts and conveyed truth. Her life became a delicate balance of practice, performance, reflection, and teaching. She learned to manage her time carefully, to focus on what mattered and to let go of what did not. She discovered that discipline and dedication were essential, but so were patience, self-compassion, and the ability to celebrate small victories. Every day offered a new lesson, every challenge an opportunity to grow, and every performance a chance to share her heart with the world. Through it all, the piano remained her anchor, her mirror, and her guide. It had witnessed her struggles, her triumphs, and her quiet moments of doubt. It had listened to her fears, her hopes, and her dreams. And in return, it had given her the strength to face the world, to rise above judgment, and to trust in the truth she carried inside. She knew that her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more performances, more moments of fear and uncertainty, but she also knew that she had discovered something invaluable: the power of her own voice, the courage to express it, and the ability to touch others through the language of music. And with that knowledge, she felt ready to continue, confident that her music could carry her further than she had ever imagined. Time passed, and her music began to touch more hearts than she had ever imagined. The girl who had once been laughed at and dismissed was now quietly becoming someone people listened to, not just because of her skill, but because of the feeling she poured into every note. Each performance, whether in a small school hall or a local community center, brought her a step closer to realizing that her gift was meant to be shared. It wasn't about applause or recognition anymore. It was about connection, about reaching people in a way that words could not. She continued to practice every day, never taking her talent for granted. The piano had been her refuge for so long that she knew she owed it her dedication. She worked on new compositions, sometimes late into the night, letting her fingers move as her thoughts and emotions guided them. Each piece she created was a reflection of her journey, the struggles, the doubts, the loneliness, and finally, the courage she had discovered within herself. She began to see that music could not only express her truth, but also inspire others to find their own strength. Her reputation slowly grew beyond her school and local community. Invitations to perform at larger events came in, small concerts, cultural gatherings, even regional music festivals. The idea that once filled her with fear now excited her, because she had learned how to turn fear into focus. Every time she played in front of an audience, she felt the same thrill and nervousness she had during her first competition, but now she understood it as part of the journey, part of the growth that came with daring to step out of her comfort zone. At these events, she noticed a change not just in how people saw her, but in how she saw herself. She no longer doubted her abilities or questioned her worth. She had faced the laughter, the whispers, the teasing, and had risen above them. She realized that those early moments of judgment had prepared her, had strengthened her, and had taught her resilience. Each time she played, she felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her music carried truth and emotion in every note, and that people could feel it. Even when she performed in front of strangers, the connection was immediate. She could see their expressions change as the music reached them, the way their eyes softened, the way they leaned forward, the way they listened with their hearts rather than just their ears. In those moments, she understood that music was not just sound. It was a language of emotion, a bridge that could span the gap between people, and a mirror that reflected what words could never fully capture. She also discovered the joy of mentorship. Young students, inspired by her dedication and talent, asked for guidance. She began to teach them not just the mechanics of playing the piano, but how to express themselves through music, how to listen, how to feel, and how to let the piano carry their emotions. Teaching became another way of connecting, another way of sharing the gift she had been given. She realized that helping others find their voice was as rewarding as finding her own, and it gave her purpose beyond her personal achievements. Her family continued to support her quietly but firmly. They were proud not just of her talent but of the person she had become, resilient, kind, patient, and determined. They never pressured her, never demanded perfection, and never compared her to anyone else. They celebrated her small victories, her practice sessions, and her growth, understanding that the journey mattered more than the destination. Their presence reminded her that even when the world seemed harsh or indifferent, there were always people who believed in her. Despite the growing recognition, she remained humble. She understood that her music was a gift, not a tool for showing off. Each note she played, each composition she created, was a way of telling her story and touching others, not a way of proving herself to anyone. She had learned that validation from others was fleeting, but the truth of her own dedication and the connection she could create through her music were lasting. That understanding gave her a quiet strength, a foundation she could always return to when doubts crept in. Her compositions became more complex, more expressive, and more personal. She experimented with combining styles, blending classical melodies with modern rhythms and creating improvisations that captured the essence of her emotions. Each piece told a story of struggle, hope, resilience, joy, and discovery. People who heard her play began to recognize that her music was not just technically skilled, but deeply heartfelt. They could feel the honesty, the vulnerability, and the courage behind every note. She started to imagine her future with clarity. She dreamed of larger audiences, concert halls filled with people from all walks of life, and the possibility of sharing her music beyond her small community. She imagined workshops where she could teach young musicians how to express themselves, how to embrace their uniqueness, and how to let their voices be heard. She realized that her journey was not just about her own success, but about creating opportunities for others to find their courage, just as she had. Even with growing success, she faced challenges. There were moments when her fingers faltered, when nerves threatened to take over, and when the weight of expectations felt heavy. But she had learned to channel those feelings into her music. The piano, which had always been her companion, became her anchor in those moments, guiding her through every note and chord. She understood that challenges were not obstacles but opportunities to grow stronger, more focused and more expressive. Through it all, she never forgot the laughter and dismissal of her past. She carried those memories not as burdens but as reminders of how far she had come. They were proof that perseverance and dedication could overcome doubt and judgment. Every performance, every composition, every student she mentored was a triumph over the moments when the world had underestimated her. She realized that the laughter of the past could no longer reach her because she had discovered the strength of her own truth. Her story began to inspire others. People who had felt invisible, overlooked, or misunderstood saw in her a reflection of their own struggles. They saw that being different was not a weakness, that persistence and dedication could lead to fulfillment, and that expressing oneself through passion could create connections stronger than any fear or judgment. She realized that her music had the power not only to touch hearts, but also to change lives by showing others that their voice mattered. With time, she began to receive invitations to perform in larger venues, sometimes traveling to new towns and cities. Each performance brought new experiences, new audiences, and new lessons. She learned to adapt to different pianos, different acoustics, and different expectations, always trusting her instincts and the connection she felt with the music. Every audience, no matter how large or small, became a conversation, a shared moment where hearts could meet through sound. Through these experiences, she discovered another truth. Success was not measured by recognition, money, or applause, but by the impact she had on others. Each person who left a performance feeling moved, inspired, or understood was a reminder that her music mattered. Each student who found courage and confidence through her guidance was another sign that her journey was meaningful. She realized that the legacy she could leave was not in trophies or titles, but in the hearts she touched and the inspiration she provided. She also began to reflect on the life lessons she had learned through her music. She understood the value of patience, the importance of dedication, and the power of resilience. She knew that fear and doubt were natural, but they could be overcome by trust in oneself and in one's abilities. She understood that being misunderstood did not diminish her worth, and that staying true to her passion was the most important form of courage. These lessons became as important to her as her music itself, guiding her in all aspects of life. Even as her recognition grew, she never lost the quiet, reflective moments with her piano. She would sit alone in her room, exploring new compositions, improvising melodies, and letting the music carry her thoughts and emotions. These moments reminded her of where she had started, of the laughter and dismissal that had once surrounded her, and of the quiet determination that had kept her going. The piano remained her closest friend, the one constant that had seen her through every struggle, every triumph, and every moment of doubt. She began to think about the future, about what she wanted to leave behind. She wanted to inspire not just through her performances, but through her story. She wanted young people, especially those who felt different or overlooked, to know that their voice mattered. She wanted them to understand that dedication, patience, and courage could lead to fulfillment, and that even in the face of ridicule, there was always a way to rise above. Her music became a tool not just for expression, but for teaching and inspiring others.